We continue with our program, and I have the honor to kindly ask His Excellency, the Minister of State of Artificial Intelligence of the United Arab Emirates, His Excellency Omar bin Sultan Al Olama, who joined us today for a conversation, let's say, and a presentation about this innovation in the government. Please, Your Excellency. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming. We have this conversation. I think this conversation will be very important in this conference. And because we are talking about innovation, and we are talking how the governments can face the problem of innovation, not only the students in the schools, but also the governments. Everybody knows innovation is a big challenge for the government. And when a government has some innovative initiative, if the results are not exactly what the people expect, because they are innovating, then the people used to say, okay, they are wasting money, public money for experiences, but there is no other solution than innovate and test as the private sector is used to do. Then, the Ministry of Artificial Intelligence is the only, I think, in the world with this title and with this purpose. Then I would like to start this conversation, if Your Excellency agree, by asking how this idea arrives and what is the story of this Ministry of Artificial Intelligence.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بداية أود أن أشكر جميع القائمين على هذه المبادرة المميزة وعلى من وضع هذا المؤتمر. نحن بحاجة إلى مؤتمرات كثيرة مثل هذا المؤتمر ولمناقشة هذا الموضوع بشكل مستمر. As I was asked by the organizers to speak in English, I will continue the conversation in English, but I think for the other questions we can change the language depending on the audience's preference. With regards to artificial intelligence, I would like to start by mentioning a few points of, let's say, the history of the development of humanity. We, as humans, developed certain ministerial posts depending on the mandate or the impact of a certain technological innovation or a discovery. Before the advent of oil and electricity, there weren't any ministers of energy in governments. And there weren't, I'm sure, ministers focused on ensuring that wood and coal were managed properly. Before the advent of the internet and the advent of telecommunications, there weren't ministers of ICT and ministers of communications in government. We hear a lot about the impact of artificial intelligence and how artificial intelligence is going to shape the future and how artificial intelligence is going to be paramount for governments who want to survive in the coming years. But we don't see governments doing enough. So in the UAE, our leadership actually was wise enough to think that instead of waiting for change to happen, let us be part of the change and let's be proactive and ensure that artificial intelligence impacts us positively rather than negatively, and that we do shape this technology with the countries and the governments and the companies that are shaping it moving forward. So this is where it started from. The mandate is focused first and foremost to ensure that artificial intelligence impacts people's lives positively, that we also focus on the technology in a positive sense. So let me give you an example. If we look at climate change, the reason why climate change is a challenge that we're facing today is because it is a result of urban and industrial development that was done on a country-wide level. Each country worked on it on its own. And today, for us to combat climate change, we need to all work together. So even if a country says that we're going to do everything we can to combat climate change, we will not be able to push the envelope. With AI, our approach in the UAE is to actually deploy it responsibly, to ensure that this technology impacts us in a positive sense, and that in the long term, it creates a better future, not just for Emiratis, but for everyone, everywhere across the world.
The other question is related to the link between this idea with the strategic plan or the strategic vision for the country. What is the time frame? What is the vision? What is the context of this vision?
So more than 10 years ago, the leadership of the UAE put a vision for the UAE for the year 2021, for us to be among the best countries in the world by the year 2021. Before that vision is achieved, we were able to actually achieve many of the markers and the mandates and the KPIs that the leadership have put for us. His Highness Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan, the President of the UAE, and His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum put another vision, the 100-year vision for the UAE, so Vision 2071. Now, this vision is going to be us celebrating our 100-year anniversary by actually becoming the best nation on earth. Being the best nation on earth, not on every parameter, but focusing on elements that impact our people and our residents in the UAE, elements that impact our economy in a positive sense, and make sure that we do not get disrupted by all the changes that are happening, but we are the disruptors in a sense. So artificial intelligence is a facet of that overall and overarching vision.
Thank you. I move now to the second part because Your Excellency accept, then we open the debate to the room in the end of this first part of the conversation. The second point is, what are the main points of the objectives and focus of the Ministry of Artificial Intelligence in terms of policy and programs?
So when the ministry was established, we spent a good 6 months trying to understand where we can play a role here, because there's a big challenge. There's no one to benchmark against. This role was created first in the UAE, and we could not really benchmark against anyone. So we collectively invited more than 200 experts, so the foremost experts in AI, to come to Dubai and to try to give us their recommendations. How can we do it in the best way possible? And the outcome of that gathering was something that was quite shocking. No one knows what to do. Everyone has a different view, everyone has a different vision, everyone has a different set of recommendations. But what we need to do is do what's right for our people and do what's right for the UAE. One of the most important elements is the human is going to have to play a role in the future. So we focused a lot over the last year on creating programs for human development, for getting people ready for the artificial intelligence, to ensure that they are not displaced or replaced, but they are empowered by artificial intelligence, and to also migrate people who are going to lose their jobs because of AI into other jobs. Another thing we did was we understand that AI is going to impact certain fields in a very positive sense. So how can we ensure that we can leverage AI to make our country more competitive? So a simple example here. The UAE has more than 200 nationalities. It's a country that welcomes people from all around the world. But there is a challenge there, which is people come with diseases, people come with certain things that are related to where they're coming from. So how can we overcome a challenge like tuberculosis, which is a big challenge for a country like the UAE? We deployed an AI solution that diagnoses tuberculosis in less than 1 second at an accuracy that exceeds 90%. So the best doctor on earth diagnoses at around 85%. That's a doctor in Mayo Clinic or one of the top clinics. You're able to achieve that through an algorithm and at the same time save a lot of money because it costs us around $50,000 to develop the tool. Now, that does not mean that doctors are going to be replaced. It means that diagnosis will be done by machines and the care element is going to be given by doctors. The doctor is going to be used for the important part of actually taking people to the healthcare delivery. Another element, oil and gas. It's such an important field. How do we ensure that AI helps us take better decisions, helps us as humans ensure that this field continues to generate profits and continues to be the most productive and the most revenue-generating sector in the UAE? And then finally, we've also deployed AI in infrastructure development. In infrastructure development, the impact on humans is actually very minimal. There's exponential and enormous impacts on safety, enormous impacts on returns because of the resources being used and the time and the efficiency. And the end product is an infrastructure that is incredible. So you have the best quality infrastructure in the world. That to us is how artificial intelligence should be used. Not to replace people, but to empower people.
Support. And what are the main, until now, the main challenges? More difficult and more challenging for the ministry? I know this is a tough question, but I think it's important because the Ministry of Artificial Intelligence is such an innovative approach. Then I think everybody is curious to know what is the big challenge you find in your responsibility.
So let me break this down to two components. There's the challenges that all governments are going to face, and this is a learning that I'd love to share. And then there are the challenges that we face that whoever else wants to follow on this path can also learn from. The first and biggest challenge that every corporation, every government is going to face, and this is relevant to all of you, is ignorance within the decision-making process. So if as an official or as a leader, I'm required to take a decision on AI, should I deploy AI, yes or no? And should I actually go ahead with this? Without understanding the impact it's going to have, without understanding the challenges that AI creates as a technology, without understanding what are the points or the steps required for us to deploy AI, you're going to face a big challenge where this technology is going to create a lot of negative impact rather than positive impact. It might leak data, it might give you bad advice, it might be actually the wrong tool for your entity or your government entity or corporation. So how we overcame that, we actually created the program and mandated every government agency to send someone to go through a one-year course that we did with the University of Oxford to teach people to understand how to ask the right questions of AI, to read the code, to understand the impact, and then be the informed decision makers in every government entity. So no one has an excuse by saying, I did not know what I was doing, or I do not have someone that I can lean on. One of the challenges we're facing right now is the lack of unity in the global front when it comes to AI. There needs to be more support towards working together for this technology. And let me give you a few points on this. You see there's a race globally happening on AI, and every country wants to dominate it, which is, I think, positive for the development of the technology, but very negative for the potential harm that it's going to create. We want to ensure that, as the UAE, we are today an importer of the technology, that we are not harmed by deployment that's happening in China or the US. And we also want to ensure that, moving forward, certain countries do not get left out. This is a really big challenge. Because leaving countries out, and then when they realize that the technology has reached a maturity where it's too late to follow, that's going to be a big challenge for all governments globally.
Thank you. Now, before we open the debate, the last part of this conversation will be focused on the education and AI, because the focus of the conference. Then, in the vision of Your Excellency, what is the impact of AI in education? That's the first. It's a very general point. In general, not in specifics.
So I'm going to go against the general consensus of AI is going to replace humans and AI is going to replace teachers and all of that. I think that AI is going to support many fields, and specifically education. I think that AI is not the solution. It is one of the components that's going to lead to the solution. There are many issues with the education sector that we need to look at. So, for example, how are teachers today being compensated? How are teachers being trained? And are teachers today feeling like they are the people that are creating the better future and creating the individuals that are going to lead countries? That is a challenge that AI on its own is not going to solve. But I think AI is going to solve one of the issues that was asked by one of the attendees here, which is today every single individual absorbs knowledge in a different way. Some people are very visual. They like to see content in front of them. Others like to hear it. Others like to actually experience it. So what AI is going to do on that front is it's going to curate the content for the individual, which is incredible. But there needs to be an interaction with an individual in the classroom to ensure that the emotional intelligence side of things is fulfilled. So that's why I think AI is never going to replace teachers. The teachers are always going to be in the classroom because they are a main pillar of the classroom and of the education sector. And let's use an example here to elaborate on this point. We see a lot of different platforms like Udacity, like Khan Academy, like Coursera, where you have Harvard quality education online. And in most cases, it's actually free. Why don't we have Harvard educated individuals in every country? It's not because they lack internet access. It's not because they don't have computers. It's because they need guidance in many of these platforms, and they need someone to actually console them and ask them questions and engage with them. So there is going to be an element of technology, but the human element in education is going to be key. The other challenge that we have with education is there hasn't been enough innovation in the education sector. So there has been a lot of fancy technologies that were deployed. And I'd like to share a funny story. If you look at the historical, let's say, forecasts of how the future of education is going to be, There are many futurists in the 70s and 80s that talked about how PDDs, personal dictation devices, are going to be revolutionary for teaching. What these were devices that you can hold and you can record your teacher speaking in class and go back home and listen to the lesson. That was absolutely mind-boggling at the time. And people thought that this is going to revolutionize education. It didn't. At the end of the day, we have these recorders in our phones today, and no one uses it to record the lesson and go back to listen to it. And if there are people who use it, they're very minimal. So technology is not the solution. Technology is a tool that can solve some of the issues. The solution needs to be a holistic reinvention of the sector. And I think that can be done through understanding the needs of the different cultures, of the different students, retooling and reskilling teachers, ensuring that they are the best of the best. If you have the best people in education, you will have the best students. But if you have people who don't have any other options going into education, you will have a big issue moving forward.
Good. Thank you. And another point I would like to raise here is about the content. We know AI can provide, let's say, personalized content for every student, but in the other side, AI also is a risk, and every student is specialized in what they want, and the sense of community and knowledge sharing, the same common language, can be lost a little bit. What is the vision on the content and the future of AI for education?
So you will be presented with many options of different AI tools that help optimize content. What matters is not just the content, it's also the drive for curiosity. So how do you get the students to want to learn more? That's more important than the content that is displayed in front of him or her. And I think that is where most entities or most platforms actually lack. The other thing that I'd like to share on this is I think that the curriculum component and the content component is going to go through a big transformation. Just because today, if you look at how we consume content from YouTube and how we consume content from social media and different platforms, it is much easier. The design element is much more friendly to us as individuals than current or traditional educational curriculum models or content models. So I think there needs to be more, let's say, user interface, user experience thought going into the content side of education, rather than just trying to give them as much content as possible and cramming it in their brains. It's not about memorizing, it's about actually understanding the content.
This AI management of the content, in your vision, eliminates the boundaries about the global learning. I mean, people can use, what is the vision on this point, the globalization of the learning objects, let's say?
It depends on the time frame that we're going to talk in, but I don't want to make predictions. What I'm going to say is, what I think is going to happen in the medium term probably is there is going to be no excuse to say that I am from country X and I don't have a world-class education. Today you have the knowledge of humanity at the touch of your fingertips, right? You can, through a click of a button, answer any question online. You can, through a click of a button, look at any scientific research, or most scientific research, and interact with any individual anywhere on Earth. What's going to happen is we're going to be able to actually provide world-class education and content to people anywhere through artificial intelligence and through technology. But we need to understand that technology is a tool. Technology is not the solution because we have it today. You have it on your phone. Are you an expert on nuclear physics? You can be, but you're not. At the end of the day, we don't have the drive. And I think that is where the educational system is going to make the difference.
Thank you. My last question is, of course, technology is a tool, but it's not neutral. I mean, if you use different technology, you also can arrive to different results. Do you think AI in education produce better students?
So there are certain studies that prove that AI, not just in education, but in content delivery is better than the humans. And let me give you a specific example. You will realize that in more cases than one, you will be on YouTube looking at a video on a specific topic, so a TED Talk on X. And 10 hours later, you're watching a completely different video on a completely different topic. I don't know, how to carve watermelons, right? And you'd ask yourself, how did I go from a TED Talk to this? Yeah. And why did I spend 10 hours watching videos? It's because AI was able to optimize the content and also able to present to you different pieces of content that made you stick on that platform for so long. That is, I think, the power of AI.
Yeah, it's a very good point.
It's a good tool to make sure that we are able to keep on pushing content to individuals. But it is not the only tool. And again, I want to re-emphasize on this point.
Thank you, but I think it's a great point. Well, I finished my list of curiosity. Then we open now the questions here. His Excellency is available for some questions or comments and comment over comment. One is here.
Dr. Hamid Ahmed, Deputy Minister for Higher Education in Iraq. I really feel very inspired by the enthusiasm, dedication, hard work of His Excellency the Minister. And it really reminded me the title of the ministry reminded me in 2009, I was in Baghdad and I met South Korean minister. The title also was provocative at the time, where he's the Minister of Knowledge Economy. And if we want to square these two posts, the Minister for Knowledge Economy, now we have a Minister for Artificial Intelligence. If we want to square these two titles with the topics that we gather today, which is education, Bloomberg recently listed 4 or 5 countries who are GDP based on knowledge economy, which is South Korea, Singapore, Finland. And they found, interestingly, that these countries are the best in education system. So if you want to have a knowledge economy, if we want to have artificial intelligence, you have to have a good education system. And I think Patrick mentioned early in the morning about these foundation, literacy, numeracy, and understanding science. So, and the world is changing, and changing in a very sort of exponentially, especially if we talk into IT. It's the base of change is so high. And I think we in the MENA region shouldn't be wait for the change. We should really, whether government, educator, industry, they need to prepare reskilling, upskilling, retraining their people in order to embrace this change. Yes, maybe by 2026, as we understand, most board of directors will have an artificial intelligent machine helping them to take a decision. But we shouldn't also forget the other dimension of skills, like what we call just this morning, some of the people mentioned about emotional intelligence. So I think overall, as you mentioned, Your Excellency, it is a tools. Still other human dimension is there, but how we could utilize these tools to help us prosper this MENA region. So I applaud you, and I really very happy to hear this young enthusiast minister driving the UAE into this era of innovation. Thank you very much, Ambassador, Excellency.
Thank you for that, I think, very well pointed out statement. And I must agree. I think that if you can get one thing right in any country, it should be education. If you start with education, everything else will follow. You'll have the economy, you're going to have the society, and every other element of it. What I would also like to say is, if you look at artificial intelligence, if you look at all of these technologies, they are great, but what needs to be the main driver for using them is not the fancy, shiny skin of technology by saying that we are the most cutting edge. It should be, why are we using them, all right? So it's sad that in most cases when you look at education, there are certain individuals or certain, let's say, governments that invest a lot on the fancy educational component, which is having smart boards or having certain technological components that don't really add much on the student journey or the student experience. And that, to me, is sad. Because if you have a chance to improve education, it should be at the core principle of what education is about. How do you ensure that these students go from where they are to being really able to use that knowledge in the right manner? The final thing I want to say is, we can actually take examples from Africa on this. Because of the exponential change and the rate of change, we as the Middle East and the MENA region are able to leapfrog certain developments. So in Kenya and in other countries in Africa, they did not have landlines, but they leapfrogged into mobile. And today they were able to actually achieve amazing, incredible results of how they became mobile first and digital currency, and how they're able to actually create certain services on the mobile. I think there's an opportunity for us here. But the opportunity will come if we become shapers of this technology. If we are followers, unfortunately, we will still be stuck in this place forever. And I just want to give a historical example, and this is something that's very dear to my heart. In the year 1455, so from the year 813 AD, to the year 1455, we were the leading region in the world in science, technology, innovation, and we had the best economy, we had the best society at the time, and no one on earth can refute that statement. Something happened in the year 1515 that changed all of that. And people don't really recognize what that is. In the year 1455, a technology was invented that had the potential to reshape civilizations. It would reshape society, it would reshape individuals, and the economy as well. And that technology was going to create a lot of disruption. Every single civilization on earth welcomed it. So they adopted it, they accepted it, and they said, this is a good technology to use. The only civilization on earth that banned this technology was the Arab and Muslim civilization in the year 1515. It was the Gutenberg printing press. So instead of riding on a camel or a horse or a donkey for months on end to access a specific piece of literature, you're able to copy it and send it to that person at his home. That was a great invention, and it was really revolutionary at the time. Unfortunately, we in the region could not, and I don't say we, I wasn't alive back then, and most of us weren't. But, or if there's anyone here that was, I want to meet that person. But what I would say is, this decision led to impacts that we still are seeing today. We went from being the most advanced and the most cutting edge to, unfortunately, not at that position. AI brings the same promise. Maybe the same, maybe even more. So the only answer for us is not to wait, but to shape it today.
Thank you.
My name is Dr. Stephen McKee. I'm the president of World DIDAC, Global Association of Educational Manufacturers, and also president of LabTech International. And we work in skills training, and what you said, Your Excellency, on your comments really resonates with a lot of us in the educational market. And we're concerned with two aspects of this. One is to how do we teach AI, and what are the skills that are necessary for that? That's one issue that we all have in our schools, because we know it's a desirable skill of Industry 4.0 and where our economies are going. The other is how do we use AI for better teaching and learning and delivering the educational promise to more students, particularly in disadvantaged areas, like you said. And personally, one of my hopes is that with the use of the analytics and the information gathering that's been referred to by the other presentations, is that we can finally deliver really adaptive learning, as you mentioned. Different people like to learn in different ways. And this is a nature of humans all over the world. And there are variations in this. But if we can map those things, much in the way that our social media does to present trivial things like advertising, but if we can catch the interest of people, to stimulate that and to give them the information the way that they best can receive it, that will be a tremendous change that will have us finally be able to do differentiated learning. There's not been a lot of research on this globally, as a matter of fact. The reason why it's so darn difficult to do as a teacher. If you have 40 kids or even 20 kids in your classroom, some places 60 kids, how do you even give the attention span to even understand what each student is? So it's virtually impossible to do, except in very, very small groups. But AI has this potential. But we need to research this more, and we need to look into this in a better way. And if we can achieve that, we can then maybe even change the way that education is done to, I think, to go beyond time-based education. Why do we have 6-month courses, 1-year courses, and things like this? This is something that if we changed to that, then we could go into continuous learning. I see these as some of the promises, and would like to hear a little bit about perhaps launching some research collaborations, how that could be done. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the question. Let me break it down to 2 parts. The first is, how do we teach AI, or what should we do on that front? And I want to actually say something about what we're doing in the UAE, and then what I think is going to happen. So in the UAE, we created a lot of different programs to ensure that we educate people and we actually get them interested in AI. AI is going to impact every single field, and most of you know this. AI is going, if you want to become a lawyer, AI is going to shape the legal sector. If you want to become a doctor, AI is going to shape the healthcare sector. So what we're trying to do in the UAE is ensure that all students get exposure of what AI is, the promise of AI, and how it's going to impact them early on. And I think that's something that most countries should do. We're also actually deploying AI within the school curriculum. So from grade 6 onwards, students start to learn how to code Python and start to actually interact with the technology, because it's very critical. Now, we're doing a lot on that front, but I'm going to say something that might seem controversial. If you ask most of the educational experts what was going to be the skill necessary for people to be a part of the future in, let's say, the 1990s, they would say you would need to know how to learn how to create a website, to code a website, to be part of the new revolution. I want to ask the whole, the audience here a question. How many people in this hall know how to develop websites? Please raise your hands. So less than 20, less than 5 or 10. The thing is, these tools today became democratized. So you can develop a website using Wix or Squarespace or whatever, and the technology itself made it easier for us to actually create these tools. I do believe that AI in the future is going to be something that is easier for us to deal with and to create. So people are going to be able to actually code AI or use AI without needing to hard code it. But until that future happens, if it does happen, it's important for you to give students the tools necessary to be part of this future. So they can either create it for you, or someone else will, and you actually get to use it. The other facet of your question, if I may, which is the tools that we can use and things that we can do. Analytics is very important. But let's go back and ask our question. Do we have data? It's a data-rich environment, yes, but data is not collected. So going to that point and understanding what you can do with the data and how you can use it and what are the outcomes that you want are key if you're going to use AI. Many people, and if you sit with them and they say, we've deployed AI. What have you done exactly? It's more or less a gimmick, and that's very unfortunate and it's very sad. If you don't understand what the end result of the deployment is going to be, you're wasting your time, you're wasting your money. The other part of this is I think that the impact of AI in the education sector is not just on content delivery and curriculum delivery and student management. It's actually on procurement as well. It's actually on managing resources and logistics within the schools. There are so many different elements of the education system that AI is going to impact, not just one facet. So for every country, for every individual, for every decision maker, try to understand where AI is going to have the biggest possible potential positive impact and the least negative impact, and that's where you start deploying it. Not just saying, this is a tool that's deployed in the US, let's deploy it. Or this is a tool that is being deployed in the UAE, let's deploy it. Each country has a different set of needs. And that's an important element. Finally, if you look at students that are graduating today versus students that graduated 3 or 4 generations ago, people used to be a lot more educated. So if you look at the depth of knowledge, people were a lot more general in their knowledge, but they actually were able to have a discussion and answer your questions and deep dive into the subject matter. So critical thinking was really essential back then. Today, unfortunately, it's more memorization. So you're able to have a discussion to a certain degree, but then you lose the edge that you have just because you were optimized to memorize the content. I think we need to go back to that. Get that right. You need people who have a broad view or a broad set of knowledge, while at the same time being able to critically think and have discussions with others, because that is the key to creating the future.
Thank you. I think one more, and after we have to.
Hi, Professor Iman Gad, the Dean of the Faculty of Education at the British University in Dubai. I've got one question. Your Excellency, this is amazing, but how do you deal with the older generation who are somewhat, I would say, refusing, not necessarily understanding AI? This is alienating for people like me and other people, and they find it a little bit challenging. How do you deal with something like that?
I think that's a problem that Hollywood created, and we now need to actually overcome. If you look at how AI is being communicated, it's being communicated as a very negative technology, and people are using it to create fear-mongering between people, right? The first way to overcome that is actually show people that they can actually be a part of this. There are tools for you to learn how to code today, whether you are 12 years old or 80 years old. Anyone can go through these tools and learn, right? There are also ways for us to use AI in our daily lives and make it benefit us. So I think that the government needs to do a lot in showing people that this tool has negative and positive impacts and that you need to be a part of the future. You don't need to resist change because change is going to come whether you like it or not. And this is what people don't understand. They think if we become Luddites and say we don't interact, then we don't need to interact. You will have to interact at one day with this technology. So it's better that you interact and you're informed rather than you interact with it and you're misinformed or not able to actually do something about it.
Thank you very much. Professor Mohammed Jemni, the Director of ICT at the Arab League Educational, Cultural and Scientific Organization, ALEXO. I would like to thank you very much, Your Excellency, for all information about the great work of your ministry. And I think it's not strange that UAE, which is the #1 of many fields, to have this Ministry of Artificial Intelligence. So my question is related to strategies and building strategies. As you mentioned, artificial intelligence covers many sectors, or maybe all sectors. And I think every sector has to have his own strategy. And on the other side, a national strategy should be also available because there is correlations between all sectors. As you mentioned in many examples you give us, for example, higher education and the employment. The health sector, the industry sector. So I think the problem, or maybe the challenge, how to build strategies. Every sector is isolated, or it should be a national strategy. So can you comment a little bit related to your experience about this dilemma between the individual or sectoral strategy and the national strategy? Thanks a lot.
I think that's a very important question, and I'll tell you why. The biggest issue with putting together strategies is every single person who works on a strategy starts by doing the same thing. They start by trying to boil the ocean, right? They try to do everything at once and try to cover all facets at once. And at the end of the day, you feel like it's a great document, but it can't be implemented. The other thing is, when it comes to national versus sector-specific strategies, there are challenges that will be created by AI being deployed in certain specific fields. So it's important for you to have a holistic approach of the technology, a holistic approach of the impact before going down and trickling it down on the specific industry or the specific sector. So what I would say is, let's look at it first from a countrywide level. What do we want to achieve with this technology? And being informed about artificial intelligence and its impact is key here. Then looking at where you can have the biggest impact of AI with spending the least amount of resources, so quick wins, I would say. Because what most countries face is they have an amazing strategy that will take 10 years to deploy, and it starts to lose steam as time passes by, because people feel fed up. You know, we've heard about AI, we've heard about the promise, but we haven't seen anything. So being able to actually have something on the ground that you can feel, when I actually give you this example of tuberculosis, or oil and gas, or infrastructure development, if we try to do everything at once, we wouldn't have been able to achieve anything. But finding one use case in every sector and understanding what the impact is going to be, what the result that we want is, and also putting all resources on that is the key to working with AI. And then finally, sharing different insights with different individuals within the government, within the cabinet, within the country. Because this technology is not new, it's been around for 50 years, but the way that it has grown and the way that it has impacted different fields is new. So it's good for us to learn from each other. I think this is something that many people take for granted. Have a discussion, understand what's happening in other fields and sectors, and what you can learn and do on your own sector as well.
Thank you very much, Professor Abdel Majid bin Amara, the DG of Higher Education in Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research in Tunisia. Your Excellency, for sure, the use of AI in higher education will not replace educators or faculty members' role, but the use of these technologies will affect the relation between professors and students. And we are talking about a huge number of students and faculty members. If I refer to one slide presented this morning, we are talking about 500,000 faculty members and about 9 million students. How we will manage these changes in the universities and especially in institutions in the human science fields, because in engineering schools or computer science schools there are no problem, but in human science the issue is very important. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There is a last question there. Okay. There is a last question. We joined the 2 questions and we have to close. I'm sorry for that. I know it's very frustrating, but we cannot continue all day. Please.
Thank you. Always gives me great hope when I see young men such as yourself in such a position. My name is Wadi Atiyi. I was the Dean of the School of Business at the American University of Sharjah, from the original team that established that institution. And the thing, when I came from, I was a professor at Johns Hopkins University, and when I came to the Middle East for the first time, the thing that surprised me the most was the issue of culture. I look at the universities and education in the US that have become an engine of growth, of spinning and birthing companies. And then when I came here, and AUS has done an incredible job and is doing a fantastic job, but for me the question is how, from an educational aspect, how can we use adaptive technology to create that culture of innovation and change the mindset of dependency? And looking at the US, when I look at Brooklyn, which was sending, the high schools were sending kids to Harvard and Princeton, versus Harlem, which was 1 mile away, which was terribly rated. And then what a fellow by the name of Jeffrey Canada changed the system completely. Do we look at these examples and say, look, if it worked there, and there are so many similarities that with the problems we have here, what can we do to create that culture of innovation? And is there a way to jumpstart it? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I'll start with the second question first and then go to the first one. I have many discussions with the individuals from the US, from Europe, from Asia as well about these topics and how the culture is here and how things happen here. And one thing that we forget, or we tend to forget when we have these discussions, is how new these systems are in the Middle East. So we are relatively new to the whole higher education process and how that actually creates output or outcomes compared to the rest of the world. But there has been a shift. So let me use the UAE as an example. We were known to be technology importers. We were known to be focused more or less on government-dependent jobs and to actually create things related to the oil and gas sector. But there was a big drive from leadership in the UAE to push people towards being more entrepreneurial, to create more unicorns, to focus on tech, etc. And what that led to was 3 or 4 of the biggest exits or the biggest acquisitions that we've heard of in the past couple of years. Careem, for example, being acquired by Uber for $3.1 billion. Souk being acquired by Amazon for over $500 million. And Media.net being acquired by a Chinese giant for more than $900 million. There is a shift happening. And this is actually trickling down in the universities. So there will be a shift of mindsets and a shift of as well ambitions and aspirations. But the government needs to play a role. So if the government creates programs that gets people aware of, you have a lot of time while you're in university, use the resources, so the professors around you, the infrastructure that you have to create a company or to create a startup or to do something that has a potential economic impact, that is going to create the change that we want. We're doing things in the UAE, so there are projects that hopefully are going to be announced over the next couple of months that are focused specifically on this issue and solving it. But I think for the time that we have been doing this and for the resources that we have been putting in education over the last 30 years, we are very new to this whole endeavor, right? I actually am very optimistic about the next 30 years. I think that there's a lot that we are learning and there's a lot that we are doing. So the next 30 years are going to be very different to the first 30 years. And we have a secret tool that most other countries don't have, which is the youth. So look at most countries. The demographics are mostly either, we're looking at older aged people or people that are going to hit, pension age, whether it's in Japan or other countries. The Middle East has more than 50% of its population under the age of 25. So these people can be molded, they can be shaped into the leaders that we want them to be. But it's about actually putting the efforts on the ground to ensure that they go towards that. With regards to the second question on the relationship between the professor and the students, there is going to be a disruption happening in the higher education sector. I think that research itself is going to be impacted. AI can crunch so much data at such a rate that can do it better than humans. But what that will lead to is much better development and much better scientific papers that will create more companies, that will take us as well as individuals to new heights. And I think new eras of scientific discovery. What I think we need to do as governments and as the private sector as well is to try to weather the storm by being flexible and being proactive. So if we know that AI is going to impact the sector, try to map out who's going to be impacted the most and how can we best use these people in other sectors or in other fields in the best way possible. I think that in human sciences, AI has already beaten humans. And we can actually use social media as an example. Today, social media platforms have more content and more information about each one of you and me than our best friends, our loved ones, and our parents, right? And they're able to use that data to push certain things to us or to actually make us take certain decisions that we think are our own decision. So it's able to get to your psychology. That is only going to increase. So it's very important for us to also be part of that change and to be part of that disruption rather than just react to it.
Thank you very much. I think one of the conclusions is we need a lot of human intelligence to manage artificial intelligence. Minister, thank you very much for this time. I think everybody enjoyed and was very, as somebody said, great inspiration for all the debate, I'm sure, for the coming days. Thank you very much for this moment and for this conversation. Thank you very much. Great. Thank you.